And just like that, half a day is over, but we still have, probably you have some questions, and so we're now in our roundtable discussion. And so with that, with all our investigators this morning, let me call them as they gave their talk. Dr. Clayton Johnson, please, on stage. Dr. Carmen Alonzo, Dr. Daniel Linares, Dr. Oliver Duran, Dr. Kure, please join us as well. And for the breakout session speakers, Lance, please come up, and Chelsea.
Breaking the order.
For your questions, you have two options. One, as you may see, there are microphones on that side, and I think one more on this side. We encourage you to give oral questions, but if you're really that shy, you can give some written questions and pass it on to our people who are at the back then. But please, as much as possible, we encourage you to speak up and pretty much give, this is a dialogue anyway, and so we encourage you to voice out any questions that you have. Okay? Shall we have the first taker of questions from the audience? Yes?
With this question, I would like to ask Dr. Daniel. Okay. What actions do I need to do to improve the herd immunity in case our herd have the situation the same with the case you said this morning?
Maybe rephrase the
So
question.
if I understand, the question is how do we build immunity in the breeding herd, right? Yeah, good question. And I think the answer is going to be two-stage process. One, it always starts with the gilts, and however we are building that immunity with the gilts, we're going to do a very similar approach in the sows, because again, it's a continuum right between the sows and the gilts for a one health or one health status goal to bring those all together. So ideally, you're going to immunize both the gilt population and the sow population, and you're going to make sure that the biosecurity is good to keep other wild-type viruses out of the system. And while you're building the immunity, you're also taking care of the internal biosecurity. That's what we refer to as biomanagement strategies to avoid the virus from be jumping from older piglets, so from rooms to rooms and from crates to crates, and that way we push the virus slowly but surely out of the equation. And we're going to talk more about specific practices in the afternoon, both in the sow herd and in the gilt population. Good question.
I was about to say we'll move into control in the afternoon, and so we'll park that question for later as well. Any other questions from the audience? Oh, there we go.
Lena.
Lena, in the front here.
Good morning. I'm Mike from the Philippines, and I would like to direct my question to Dr. Daniel Linares. In terms of screening using PCR, can you help us guide in terms of the minimum number of samples we can run on a weekly basis? Thank you very much.
So thank you for the question. The question is about sample size, right? Number of samples. We In the PRRS control book, there is a table that we provided with recommendations for all the sample types and the stages of elimination. But long story short, for processing fluids, we like to start with one aggregated processing fluids when you're in that screening stage, collecting all the liters, if possible, from all the days, all the rooms, and then with one massive aggregated, one PCR per week. Until, and test that by PCR, always by PCR, until it's negative. Once it's negative, you keep doing that for a few weeks until it's really 3-4 weeks of negative results. That's when you start to opening the pools a little bit for one, but still one PCR with pools of 50 to 60 grade, it's still very powerful to detect the virus. So that's, and then you do that until it's negative, right? For tongue tips, it's the same story. So you collect all the tongues from the dead animals. It's good to emphasize to farm people that tongue tips is from dead animals, right? And you collect that in one massive aggregated until it's negative, until it's negative. Then you open the pools for bags of 20 to 100 pigs, so more of the same story. For the family oral fluids, some 15 oral fluids per wind batch will give you a lot of power, and you can also test that for 1 or 2 pools, right? 1 or 2 PCRs per room.
Now, picking up from there on a diagnostic topic, Carmen, would you consider SoundTalks as a diagnostic tool, or is it a production tool, or is it both?
Well, is it open? Yeah. So yeah, it's a management tool. I mean, so you can feel it like a production tool because it gives us a lot of information. The monitor has humidity and temperature sondas as well. So it provides a lot of information for the production team on management of environment. 40% of most of the alarms that we see in nursery and growing populations are due to environment management practice. So very important for the production team there. But of course, the more we use the tool, the more we learn about SoundTalks. We are identifying patterns and profiles that it will help us to target diagnostics. It's not a diagnostic tool. It guides us on when to sample and what to sample for. So very important, narrow down that screening that Daniel is always pointing out to lower amount of pathogens so we can be more accurate on diagnostics sooner. And that's pretty important because we're learning that an influenza looks like a specific profile and that PRRS has a specific profile. And the same for mycoplasma. So to your question, I would say both.
Now, you mentioned mycoplasma. My question now would be for Dr. Clayton. Quite a bit of practical question here, also bordering towards control now. Here is a customer that's nervous in doing fogging with mycoplasma, picking up from where Carmen was mentioning earlier. And they find it a bit complicated. I could relate to that. Now, how can they incorporate this practice even though they're not very techy, so to speak, when it comes to fogging of mycoplasma?
Yep. Well, I think the first thing to understand is it's kind of like reading a feedback protocol for scour control in the farrowing house. It may seem somewhat complicated as you read the protocol, but it's not terribly technical to execute. So like everything else, practice makes perfect. You don't have to use the first batch of material that you put together. You can have a practice run, so to say. And the other thing that I would offer up is veterinarians can do procedures. We don't think of that in the swine world, right? In the small animal world, we think of spaying and neutering and procedures that get done. Don't hesitate to put your swine veterinarian to work doing a procedure for you. So for farms that we manage, if that practice is going to occur, the veterinarian will actually execute that as a part of their monthly visit. And for gilt acclimation, that works fairly well because a lot of commercial farms will receive gilts once a month. And so that event could occur during the monthly visit. You go to FOG, or whatever your acclimation approach is, you go to do that procedure as a veterinarian while you are at the farm for your monthly visit. So I think it is not so technically difficult that you could not try on your own and probably feel fairly confident after a couple of tries. However, you can certainly outsource that to your veterinarian. Put them to work doing that procedure, and they'll be very skilled, very well trained, and they'll make good decisions on how to do it.
Any questions from the audience? Yeah.
Hi,
Oh,
I'm Andy from the Philippines.
Yeah.
yes, go ahead.
Okay, so I guess we've seen and heard this from the other room, the blue room, with regards to PRRS lineage. And I guess this was about a lineage 1 topic versus Engelbach PRRS. But I'd like to echo this very common question that I've been encountering in the field more and more often. It has something to do about PRRS lineages. So my question goes like, do PRRS vaccine lineages dictate or indicate the efficacy outcome of a PRRS vaccination program?
I could start saying that the answer is no, and it's on your table. I guess there's a nice diagram put together demonstrating that the Ingiovac MLV has been shown to provide efficacy across all the different lineages. So the lineage system is a very nicely system put together for epidemiological purposes and to understand transmission, where the virus is coming from. So it helps very much to understand biosecurity and biomanagement efficacy. However, gotta keep in mind that it's only based on the OR5, which is 4% of the genome, give or take. And so it doesn't represent the whole genome. And the truth is that the protective immunity for PRRS virus, it's still a Pandora box. We don't exactly know what are the true measures of protective immunity and what triggers that immunity. So the lineage system, again, I think it's great for epidemiological investigation. We use it all the time. We recommend that in every outbreak, but it's only 4% of the genome, and it would not reflect vaccine protective efficacy. That will be my experience.
I think the other thing to say is that when you look at lineage 1, it's a really diverse population of viruses. So they've been around for a long time, and actually genetically it's quite a broad, particularly when you do whole genome sequencing, you start realizing that there's a lot of differences. So guiding yourself with that is probably not a good tactic.
I'll see you talked about PRRS control during your breakout. Would you like to comment as well on that?
I think MLV or vaccine is one of the important and necessary tools for PRRS management, but sometimes it is not all of them. So that's why VI created 5 steps methodology, and maybe Professor Denarius measure it and manage it and improve it. So all of them want to tell us, besides build the herd immunity, we have to pay more attention to the biosecurity and peak flows, and we want to build the herd immunity to eliminate the subpopulations out of our herd. So it's a holistic and systematic solution.
I think there was a question on this side.
Oh, well, they're getting to that. I'll add in one more piece of perspective. So you have a long, skinny pamphlet in front of you. Open it up. It's got some folds at the top, okay? That pamphlet describes the research that has been done to answer that question, right? Because do lineage 1 modified live vaccines protect against lineage 1 viruses better? That's a researchable question. We can do research to answer that question, all right? One of the MLV vaccines that's listed in that pamphlet is a lineage 1 PRRS vaccine. You will find that there are, I think, 4 studies that have been done, 4 studies that have been done to evaluate the efficacy of that vaccine. if lineage 1 MLVs protected better against lineage 1 viruses than the other MLVs, they would do more than 4 studies. And you would have probably read at least one of the 4 studies at this point where they were shouting from the rooftops. All of these lineage 1s that are out there today, we are better as measured through average daily gain, as measured through morbidity, as measured through lung lesions. But you don't hear that story, right? And you don't hear that story because they have not been able to demonstrate that through research.
Thank you for that additional comment. Yes, sir.
Now it's a challenge to bring it back. I see Octavio having a hard time.
I'm sorry. I got a question for Professor Harris. So you mentioned in your presentation that all the girls should be vaccinated in 3 months, right? Before they get into the herd. So I want to ask your suggestion about the guild vaccination program to gain good herd immunity. So, yes. Thank you.
All right, so if the question was, I guess I said in my presentation that it would be better if you immunize the guilds 2 to 3 months before introduction, right, to the herd, and comment a little bit more about that. And I would say that the full answer is going to be this afternoon by Clayton. He's going to go really deep into that. My comment was that for endemically infected herds, where the prevalence is low but not zero, so there is some leakage of virus there still, you don't want to bring gills that are not fully immunized and develop protective immune response. So the basis for that comment was whenever you bring the gills back to the herd, make sure that they are fully protected. And studies would show that it takes 2 to 3 months to get that fully established protection. So if they have contact with the wild type, the viremia is going to be very transient, shedding is going to be close to none, and so there won't be much of a problem. But more details yet to come. I don't want to spoil all the details that's going to be shared this afternoon.
Carlo, if I may make a point. One thing that I wanted to mention earlier when you talked about the monitoring program, what is really interesting, since we started using processing fluids or tongue tips in Europe especially, we've suddenly realized many of the herds that we thought were stable are actually not. Mm-hmm. And it's opened up people's minds. There was, where's this PRRS coming from? It's still coming from your sow farm. Mm-hmm. But we needed that very routine, very population-based monitoring to actually learn that. So we were in the dark. At least now we understand, you know, sometimes it's very hard to get that sow farm stable. I mean, certainly some of these viruses in the US, it's been many months before we could, even with herd closure. But we didn't know that before. And so now everybody talks about this, but 5 years ago, we didn't have this information. So this is, for me, a game changer.
Yeah, with these investigations where we bleed close to all piglets in a room, we've realized that it's not uncommon to find prevalence of near zero, so 1-2%. And if you want to detect the virus at that prevalence using serum samples, you need 120, 150, sometimes 200, depending on the situation. So you don't do it, right? You just don't detect. So you get your false negative results. Yeah. And with processing fluids, tongue tips, family oral fluids, those like said population, with the even lower budget, you take those aggregated samples, but your herd sensitivity is just much better. So now we've never had better tools than we have today, right, to really map the PRRS situation in the farm.
Talking about monitoring, Dr. Curry showed very nice numbers there on mortalities in particular. Does JASV or Japan as a country have their own monitoring system as well?
Not really, but we follow general rule from the study in the United States. And also, there is a group about the PRRS eradication team in Japan recommend how many samples we should take. So sometime we follow that rule.
So we have a question in Chinese
Yes, please.
received in the back.
So this question is about the advantage of the tongue tip sample for the actual detection. What is the advantage for the detection when we take the samples from the tongue tip of the pigs? And the second part of this question is, if we use the tongue tip samples for the detection, for which specific pathogen the detection rate can be the highest? Thank you. 2 questions.
So was the question on tongue tips compared to maybe in general?
I can jump in with my take on the first question. So when I think of tongue tips, I immediately compare them to processing fluids. And my best response to a producer when they would say, why should we spend money on another PCR for the tongue tips? I would say it is the opposite population that we are assessing with our processing fluids. If you think about it, the processing fluids come from live pigs, pigs that were born alive and are not pre-wean mortalities. That is who we process. That is who we castrate. The tongue tips are the opposite population. They are whatever is left. They are the stillborn piglets, and they are the pre-wean mortality piglets. So if we are looking at the processing fluids, and they tell us a story that maybe is PRRS negative, but it doesn't match with all the other evidence in front of us, the tongue tips give us an alternative population of pigs in the farrowing house to see if we can find if that is where the virus is hiding. Stillborns being a great example. We know that PRRS can pass into the piglet in utero, in gestation. So we could be having stillborn piglets that are born PRRS positive and a very big risk to the rest of the farrowing house. Our processing fluids will never catch that. Our family oral fluids at weaning will never catch that. Our wean pig serum samples will never catch that. So that would be my response to a producer who would ask, why that sample? Why should we spend more money on diagnostics and look at another sample? In terms of what pathogens, it's a population-based sample, so certainly I think there will be other pathogens in addition to PRRS that we use it for, but to my knowledge, there's nobody who's very active with anything but PRRS. But certainly feel free to fill in if I got that wrong.
Yeah, we just a couple of weeks ago, we started testing for flu in a farm that where you're collecting also other wipes and other types of samples, just to understand, because it's a tongue, right? So we may have some oral fluids there. And we've been able to get in this. It's still preliminary. We still need to replicate that in more herds. But we've been able to detect flu. And I'll guess that any other pathogen that causes that systemic infection, because the tongues is a little bit of tissue sample with blood, right, fluids, but also some of the oral material too. So we would expect that would work with that too. And agree with that. There is no better or worse, right? It's what are the situation that you use. It's good to have options in your toolbox. So depending on the question, you place the different sample types.
In Europe, we generally can't use processing fluids because most producers are not castrating now in many countries. And in fact, in some cases, not tail docking either.
This is animal welfare? No.
Yeah, it's, you can castrate with anesthesia, but many are raising entire boars now. And if you don't have the testicles, the processing fluid loses quite a bit of sensitivity. So tongue tips have been a great alternative where we don't castrate pigs.
Talking of monitoring from diagnostics, let's now go to monitoring of market weights. So I'm looking at you, Lance. And is it really worth it to monitor and calculate this Packer matrix that you were mentioning at the breakout session?
Yes, is the short answer to that. Okay. There's a lot of talk of diagnostics, and so I really appreciate that segue. Having your Packer matrix and having access to your slaughter weights That's going to be your economic diagnostic tool, because that's where you're going to be able to identify where value is being created, and more importantly, especially in economic times like this, where prices of feed and everything else are high and pig prices are low, it's really useful to know where we're losing value, because then we can address that specifically. Our interventions and our decision making become a lot more effective because we know where we're losing value and how much we're losing value. Because it's something I have heard before, is it really worth, diverting labor and time and energy into getting this information? We seem to be doing okay, so why do we need it? There is a huge amount of opportunity out there for improvement, and especially, in situations where just even getting to break even as a farm is a difficult prospect. I think having this information will help show a path to return back to profitability. And so, especially in the case where disease is prevalent, I think you're going to see that you're losing a lot more money to disease through your Packer matrix than you realize. And so it will give you that urgency to, start making these interventions and really get after it. And so, like I said, it's a very powerful economic diagnostic tool, and I can guarantee you it's worth all of the effort to get that information.
Any questions from the audience? Yeah.
Again, I would like to direct the question to Dr. Clayton Johnson. This is actually a follow-up question given about the fogging. Given the current situation right now in the Philippines, that a lot of farms are still an open-sided, they have open-sided buildings. Do you have a special procedure in, say, doing fogging in this kind of situation? Thank you.
Yeah, good question, Mike. So the fogging is definitely a procedure where you have to have the facility design in mind. We do not like to do fogging in large open air spaces. So a room like this would be a horrible room to try to do the fogging in. Open-sided barns, natural ventilation, unless we can close up those sides, raise curtains or close doors, something to reduce the airflow, the fogging becomes a challenge. The ideal situation for fogging is like a small nursery room, say a 300 head or 400 head nursery room. They typically have very short ceilings, and because they have nursery pigs where we want to keep them very warm, they are typically very well enclosed. We will, on the fogging, reduce the ventilation as much as we can tolerate without having an animal welfare issue to keep that aerosolized fog as kind of a fog in the room. The pigs must breathe in that aerosolized mycoplasma in order to expose them in that way. The only thing I would offer, Mike, is if the facility is what the facility is. We probably won't build a new GDU just to make it easier to fog. We will add more foggers in that situation. So could we fog pigs in a room this big? Yes, but we would be talking about 10 or 20 different fogger units spaced strategically throughout the room to try and make sure that we overcome the very large airspace with more volume of material. That would be the best advice I would give you for how to pull it off, but admittedly, it will be difficult.
Any other questions from the audience? Yeah.
Okay, with all the different brands of PRRS vaccine, PCV to mycoplasma in the market, at the end of a call, it almost always simmers down to an issue of price per dose. And nobody's discussing about weight variation, being able to improve uniformity. The discussion almost always goes into how to reduce mortality, how to increase ADG, etc. So I really would like to direct this question to Mr. Lance Mulberry, and I really appreciate the topic on meat packers matrix. where would you rank weight variation or weight uniformity in terms of your KPIs, those things that you want to improve? Because weight variation is one KPI that nobody discusses. No? Everybody's focusing on more on the direct benefits. So how would you consider weight variation? Thank you.
Before you answer that, for the benefit of everybody, KPI stands for Key Performance Indicator. Right? So we're all on the same page. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Well, it will really depend on your local market, where it ranks, and on your Packer matrix, because if you saw my presentation during the breakout, there were differences from country to country, and so if your Packer matrix has very narrow ranges where the value changes, then it becomes even more important. If the ranges are wider, that will make it a little less important. But when I tell people this, I think they don't necessarily take me seriously, but if you hold everything else constant, average daily gain, feed efficiency, and just change each variable one at a time, variation is actually the most important economic variable in most markets. And like I said, that takes people by surprise and they don't take it seriously, because how can that be the case? How can variation be more important than feed efficiency or average daily gain? But like I said, depending on your Packer matrix, you can lose substantial value. If 20-30% of your pigs are receiving a price that is 10 to 20% below base price, that's huge. And there is a lot more variation in your barn than you realize. Like the distance from the heaviest pig to the lightest pig, when you measure that, like at marketing, I think it would shock most people how much weight difference there is. So like I said, if you just look at variables by themselves, it's number one.
The other huge impact is on emptying of rooms. So we're talking about biosecurity, biocontainment. If your flow gets gummed up with these slower growing, smaller pigs, and you hold on to them, you are maybe eventually getting them to the ideal weight, but at a huge cost to your flow health. Right? So it comes with a big price tag.
Yeah, huge price, because we're constrained by time. We have new pigs coming in, so we have to get these pigs out. And so when you have disease, maybe it's not severe, kind of a subclinical type of case, even then what you're going to see in your weight distribution is you're going to have a trailing tail of lightweight pigs. And that group of lightweight pigs is just ruining your total herd value. But you don't realize it, because if you're just looking at averages, you just say, oh, well, the average price we got this week was bad, so nothing we can do about that. But once you start monitoring it, like I said earlier, then you can start to look at, okay, we need to be more serious and more proactive in our interventions, because 20% of our herd is costing us a fortune. And so if we can fix that, that will bring us huge value. So yeah, it helps with the time factor by being able to improve that lightweight group, so that when you have to send them out, you're not taking a huge economic loss.
Having these talks on weight reminds me of lunch. Because
But
we have to maintain our weight.
Carlo, we have one last question that
Oh,
we
okay.
received in Japanese.
Oh,
so I would
okay.
kindly,
And we have time? Okay,
yeah,
go ahead.
pass that over for the last question.
Yeah.
And then lunch.
Yes.
So this is the last question to Lance. Let me read the question. The utilizing the Packer matrix, I have to use eyeglasses, sorry. In order to improve the value of the market the carcass utilizing the PAG matrix, do you have any specific action for improvement that you have implemented in order to improve the value of the marketed the carcass? And so we'd like to know the improvement action. Utilize the PAG matrix, please. Thank you.
Oh, that's a great question. So the number one cause of variation is disease. So being better at managing disease is going to make a huge improvement. The next step is being better just at managing pigs, taking care of those problems that crop up, feed out events, clogged water lines, things like that. Making sure that the barns are well regulated. Then number 3 is the actual marketing of pigs. So when we go in to pick which pigs are going on the truck, being better at that. And so if you have your carcass weights, you're getting that information back from your processor, you can then give that information to the team on the ground that is making those selections and say, okay, last week you picked too heavy, or there was too much of a spread, you can give them guidance, and that makes a huge improvement. So those 3 things that you can start doing right now would make a huge difference in reducing variation in your farms. And I've worked with farms in different countries on this exact problem. And so while I can't get into specifics for confidentiality, I have personally seen a huge increase in value once they get variation under control.
So I have a comment as well, Carlo.
Yep.
So we different research that we have done to measure the impact of an early intervention in the face of an outbreak. The major finding is always the improvement of average daily gain. We're not there, the 0 to 5 days acting earlier, something that could benefit from sound talks, it will give you that improvement on average daily gain. We have measured that, and the research condition is 13 grams difference, but on practical, like on real farms where we are collecting more and more data, we're always around 10 grams. So pretty good on bringing those small animals to recover sooner, so we get those groups less variable. And the same way as different studies that we have from Spain, where the average weight remains the same on farms with or without sound talks, but the variability within those groups keep increasing over time if you react later to an outbreak, to animals that you don't see them coughing, you don't see them expressing clinical signs, but they're wasting their energy over and over. So the sooner you can react, the closer those weights could be, and then you can see that on the variability of maximum and minimal weight.
Yeah.
So great question, thank you.
So control disease early, and you get 10 grams per day more
right.
faster growth.
We are there. We are acting in this branch.
Talking about growth, that even made me more hungry now. So can we? So we'll go for lunch, and we do have quite a bit of time for lunch. We'll come back. We will not come back in this ballroom. We'll again have breakout sessions on the second floor. So when we go for lunch, and where is lunch, Lena? It's on the other side.
Yeah.
So at 1:20, once you finish.
Breakfast area.
Okay. So once you finish at 1:25, go down again to the 2 breakout rooms we had before. Again, dividing into green and blue group, and we'll have 2 sets of a set again of mixed sessions. This time on myth busting. Very interesting.
Nice.
So see you again at 1:25. Thank you. Thank you.